Hey everyone, welcome back to Pop Incursions. I'm Nico, and today we are going to follow our friends to glory at the end. As the epic Agatha All Along series comes to an end, we are going to break down its finale, episode 8. The Coven goes to complete their final trial of the Witch's Road, and hopefully they get their prizes at the end in some form or another. However, the road is the least of Agatha and Billy's worries, as death has come for them and they must face her. Stay tuned.
Heard you guys were having a party.
Say what?
Avengers!
Sorry, what now?
And I will return for judgment.
May our next meeting be
Avengers!
Confusion is but the first step on the journey to knowledge.
Show some respect.
She-Hulk smash.
It's Shang-Chi.
Higher, further, faster.
You need to back off.
So episodes 8 and 9 are now streaming on Disney Plus and conclude an epic and iconic few weeks of the show. They have really done such a good job. It really is one of the best Disney Plus shows for the MCU, and I truly hope that Jack Schaefer is continued to be handed the witchcraft and supernatural projects, and especially a certain Scarlet Witch film, and hopefully a Wiccan series too. I decided to break down episodes 8 and 9 in separate videos for a couple of reasons. One, if I break down episode 8 separately and episode 9 separately, it gives me more time to work on episode 9 equally as I did for episode 8. So if I get episode 8 out to you, you have a video to watch and I can still work on episode 9 equally instead of rushing. And it also allows us to focus on what happens within episode 8 without constantly comparing it or overlooking and skipping the story because we've already watched episode 9 and we're ready to go. I have watched both, but I think doing them separate is a good way to go, and that's how we did the first 2 episodes as well. Episode 8 is titled Follow Me My Friend to Glory at the End, and like all episodes, these are lines from The Ballad of the Witch's Road.
Follow me, my friend, to glory at the end.
And this really causes us to stop and question, well, what is the glory at the end? Is it the prize that is promised? Is it the friends they've made along the way? Or is the glory the simple fact that they survived? Because it's not looking very good for the other 3 people who have not survived the road. So in itself, that may be the glory that I know if it was me, I would just be happy to finish it. The episode begins in the cabin that we saw in episode 5 with Rio, aka Death, bringing Alice to the afterlife. As in episode 5, she died protecting Agatha. Sorrowfully, Alice, like the rest of us, is having a hard time accepting the fact that literally just as she breaks that intergenerational curse, she dies. Alice says,
I can really do something with my life now.
and it truly is tragic that just as she breaks that curse, she dies, and she could have finally gotten a handle on life and actually started to succeed in life. But it cannot be reversed. And she even says to Rio, aka Death, that she's not ready, but it cannot be reversed, and she walks into the green hue with death in her hand. Elsewhere on the road, Jen and Billy are coming to terms with the fact that Lilia sacrificed herself to save them. And they also discuss Rio's revelation.
Green Witch with a capital G.
She told us who she was from the very beginning. As Rio did say,
Less a green witch, more the green witch.
and as we learned, Death was the very first Green Witch. Agatha stumbles into Rio, and Rio points out the shrinking size of her coven, but also appreciates that Lilia took the Salem 7 with her. So this does confirm that all members of the Salem 7 died, even if we couldn't see them all die.
The bodies are really piling up, just like you promised.
So was that an agreement between Agatha and Rio in episode 3 a real agreement? Because Agatha does say,
Did you doubt me?
and while I do think that here Agatha is just appeasing Rio, I don't necessarily think that once they got onto the road, Agatha, planned for any specific person to die. All the deaths that happened on the road happened quite consequentially and didn't seem overly planned, but it certainly is within Agatha's skill set to lie to look more of a badass. The real issue is, as Rio states, "You are distracting me from him," referring to Billy, and as many of us speculated, Rio, aka Death, wants to claim that body that Billy has been renting out. He's an abomination. He is disrupting the sacred balance, referring to something that would be extremely important to Rio, not just as Death, but certainly yes, but also as a green witch, that nature is a balance and a cycle, and Billy has defied that by taking this body for himself and reincarnating himself into it. It is Death's job to keep that balance and claim those bodies, but so long as Billy uses this body for his own soul, Rio cannot claim it. Now, Rio calls out Agatha as if she's cheating on her son Nicholas with Billy.
This walk with another woman's son on a road that doesn't...
Stop!
And we do learn more as to what Rio is trying to imply here in episode 9, but no spoilers. Rio says to Agatha, "No one in history has had special treatment like you." And Agatha says, "You call what you did special treatment?" And again, we learn what this is in episode 9, but at this point we have no idea what this terrible thing is, although it's pretty unanimous that it does pertain to Agatha's son, Nicholas Scratch. I do wonder if Agatha's sacrifice in this episode would have meant more to us if we knew what they were referring to, although personally, the sacrifice still meant a lot to me. Rio's next remark leads me to my next point. Why do you let them believe those things about you? And Agatha says, "Because the truth is too awful." Now, a majority of the witch community seems to believe that Agatha traded her own son for the Darkhold. And we don't know what this terrible thing is, but how much more terrible is it than people think you traded your son for a magical book? Rio speaks to Agatha about Billy. What he wants from the road is a violation. And Rio reveals to Agatha that Tommy...
His brother isn't out there. Not yet, anyway.
Not yet, anyway. And Rio explains, "The son of the Scarlet Witch stole a second life, and I cannot let him do the same for his twin. I have to take him." Agatha says to Rio, "Then take him." And Agatha looks fed up of all these predicaments that Rio seems to be in quite a lot. But Rio goes quiet, and Agatha then realizes,
"If Billy is killed, he'll reincarnate again and then you'll lose him."
as in, it'll be hard for her to find him again. And then Agatha realizes Billy has to turn himself over to Death willingly. He cannot be killed. So it seems that similar to Agatha, Billy has been able to hide from Death, whereas Agatha did so with the Darkhold. Agatha agrees to help Rio to deliver Billy to her,
I can deliver him to you.
under the condition that Rio lets Agatha go, stops pursuing her.
I want you to stop making my life hell.
Which is ironic because Death probably leads people to hell. And in a long, long, long time from now, when Agatha does eventually die, she doesn't want to see Rio's face. And this may be quite the insult to Rio, because in a way, the only time people see her face, with the exception of the Coven, is when someone dies. When you think about it in a not so obvious, or it's so obvious you can't see type of way, one of the themes of the show is death. And it's not just because of Agatha's ability to help deliver more bodies to Death. It's presented in such a way where we see Death as a person and not as maybe a theme, for example. But it definitely is a theme because we're telling a story that includes death. And we see throughout the show different types of death. Death that is unintentional, death that is an accident, death that is intentional, where someone sacrifices themselves, death where someone dies by doing the right thing. Now, to move from place to place and to show how powerful of a cosmic entity that Death is, she uses her dagger to literally cut the very fabric of reality and existence. And Death is an ancient being and powerful cosmic entity. So for her, traveling is quite simple. This is similar to Clea at the end of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. This is also a great way to use this practical set and as a practical effect. They all catch up with each other and finish walking the road, but as they get to the end, they actually come back to the beginning. So the road is a circle. However, when they realize this is the end of the road, they start to clutch their pearls because they fear they're not getting their prize at the end. We learned in the credits of episode 1 and we saw in episode 2 that witches must remove their shoes to be connected to the road and out of respect for the road. And in an act of defiance, Billy puts his shoes on because he's pissed at the road because he thinks he's not getting what he wants. However, putting on his shoes transitions him to the next trial. And let us not forget the huge theme of The Wizard of Oz throughout Agatha all along, especially with the Yellow Brick Road, aka the Witch's Road in this case. And just like that, the shoes helped them get home. It transitioned them to the very last trial, which resembles a home. Whose home? Agatha. Agatha's basement. Now, this is the Green Witch's trial, but they don't have a Green Witch with them. And you think that Rio could have stuck around to help. We see them get out of body bags in a morgue or mortuary-like room. Jen points out that the lights on the ceiling are grow lights. These also operate as the timer and the clock for the trial, like we've seen different timers throughout the trials. Are we supposed to grow something?
No soil or water. Certainly has the irritating sting of a Witch's Road trial.
They realise that their personal belongings are also in the drawers of the morgue. We see Agatha has her brooch, Jen has her necklace, and Billy has his spellbook. However, Billy's spellbook is full of ink, so it's worthless. Now, all of this may seem familiar, and this all has similarities to where the show first began. Agatha, under Wanda's spell, believing she was a detective in a Mayor of Easttown true crime style show, and after all, she was investigating the death of a woman who resembled Wanda Maximoff. Thirdly, in episode 1, Agatha saw Billy's fingertips as black, resembling what happens when you use the Darkhold. However, Billy said it was just ink, just like the bucket is full of now. So many things are calling back to episode 1. So they're in a trial where they have to grow something. They have to reflect on themselves and learn how have they grown since the very beginning. How has the road helped them grow? And they seem to have to give themselves what they wanted from the road. Especially for Billy, where he must grow as a person to be able to control his powers. Jen grows to a place where she learns to care for others and also learns to unbind herself. But Agatha, that's a bit different. What exactly has she grown? It seems that for Agatha, it could be that she has to accept that her son died. However, it's not so clear. Jen says, I couldn't save Lilia and I didn't even try to save Alice, so I'll be damned if I let you two idiots die. And this really shows the growth that has happened for Jen since walking the road, because in the beginning she was typically the first person to save herself, and she never really cared, worried, or tried saving someone else. Agatha asks her, well, how are you going to do that without any magic? But Billy points out,
she saved my life. She saved you from poisoning.
As in episode 4, when Agatha was pleading Jen to save Billy and pleading Rio not to take him. And Billy points out, Jen saved almost everyone, but saved Agatha from the poison in her own trial. However, Agatha seems to be biting her tongue about something. Oh, I just never knew you passed through there. Referring to when Jen was in Boston, the place where her powers were bound. Jen starts to realise.
Are you the one who bound me?
And in an admission, Agatha says,
I didn't know it was you!
It was the 1920s. I did some spells for banknotes.
The patriarchy really shelled out to shush a lady.
So, Agatha used to accept payment from non-witch folk to harm other witches. So, the doctor that tried to drown Jen must have paid Agatha to bind Jen's powers. Now, Agatha does point out it was bind or burn. In the 1920s, witch trials were very much so a thing of the past, especially in US and Europe. I do think that Agatha doing spells in exchange for payment from non-witch folk may actually also refer back to the story she told in episode 4 about the Daughters of Liberty. In the comics, the Daughters of Liberty would have fought for the liberation of America from England, and perhaps the English, or the patriarchy, paid Agatha to try and stop that from happening. Jen then pulls some of Agatha's hair out and then ties this hair around Agatha's hands, and Billy recognizes that Jen is doing an unbinding ritual. Jen is unbinding herself from the person who bound her.
I deny your power over me.
And this is not just about unbinding Agatha from her, but it's also about unbinding the trauma that Jen went through in losing her powers, but also all those emotions that are associated with being depowered for a century.
You hold nothing.
Jen is then seemingly hit with energy, and we see that beautiful pink magic. Finally, some pink magic in the MCU. It looks so good, and I can't wait to see her use more of it in the future. Jen got her power back, as was the point of the trial. Through walking the Witch's Road, Jen grew as a person. Now, Agatha does look somewhat enamored to see Jen's powers, and it reminds me of when Rio was like salivating when Billy was almost going to die. Then Jen just disappears from the trial, likely because she has completed her journey on the Witch's Road. She got what she wanted back. Agatha's jealousy over seeing Jen get her power back leads her to ask Billy,
You have power. Juice me.
but understandably Billy doesn't trust her, and Agatha tries to say, I won't take it all.
I won't. Liar.
And this, combined with what we see later, confirms that Agatha can control her ability to absorb powers, which means she knew what she was doing with Alice, and Alice's death could have been prevented. Agatha then mentors Billy to control his powers and find Tommy. This is a glimpse at that mentor-student, auntie-nephew relationship that we will see. Agatha reveals to Billy what Rio or Death told her.
Tommy isn't waiting out there. It's what got Rio in such a tizzy, because she knows you could do it for him.
And this really shows how powerful Billy is. Like his mama, he can will people into existence. We can hear Wanda and Vision say goodnight to the boys, and we can hear Wanda and Vision say goodbye to one another. Agatha says it's all inside Billy, all the emotions, the memories, but you can't keep him. And she holds on to his head to help guide him. And she says,
You can't keep him, so where does he go?
I don't know.
Now, as Agatha tells Billy to find him a place, we start to see these little flashes that Billy can see. And it's very much Wanda-like energy and magic that is supposedly Tommy's soul. And Billy says, I can't find him a place. And Agatha says, don't give me that.
120 bodies and be out every minute.
So there's plenty of options. Now, I wonder, is she doing this for Billy, or is she doing this to defy Rio? As Rio said, there was a trick in there. And this could be another trick, because if Agatha truly thought in this moment she was still going to hand Billy over to Rio, this meant she knew that despite doing this, it would cause the same outcome as what happened to Billy. A reincarnation of someone's soul and someone stealing a body. So it's kind of like, you know, just replacing one with another. We then see a swimming pool and a bunch of boys. They push another boy in, and Billy says they're pranking him. It was a trick. He's going to drown. It's a bad place. And Agatha says it usually is, and it kind of sucks that Billy can't like filter out a few options before choosing. And then Billy starts to doubt himself, and he asks Agatha,
Am I killing this boy so my brother can live?
so Billy's not confident in what he is doing or what he can see with his powers. He's not confident in his powers to have full conviction. He doesn't necessarily believe that this boy is going to die from this drowning. He's wondering, could he live, but I'm now stopping that because I want my brother to live? Kind of like saying, if I wasn't to interfere, would this boy live? But it's a question you're never really going to be able to answer. But the answer to that question, he's never really going to be able to know. He then screams, and Tommy is reincarnated into this other body. The tiny bit of identification we could make with this footage is he's wearing runners that resembles the colours of Speed from the comics, but we do not get to see his face. And boom, Billy disappears because he has completed the Witch's Road, he has completed his trial, and he's got what he's wanted. As Billy disappeared, the floor actually cracked and we see soil, tying us back to the trial being the Green Witch trial. So Agatha is now alone in the trial, but she still responds as if Billy is there.
No, Billy. Sometimes boys die.
And this obviously is referring to her son, Nicholas Scratch. Agatha opens her brooch to look at the lock of Nicholas's hair, and she sees that there's a dandelion seed in the brooch. So she takes it out and uses her tears as water. Now we have what was missing, the water and the soil to grow something. The lights flicker while Agatha is planting the dandelion, but thankfully it grows just in time. Soil comes pouring in on top of Agatha, but she is able to leave via the stairs, which are the same stairs that Monica Rambeau was snooping around in WandaVision. What was Agatha's growth in this trial? Was it simply to maybe work by herself to complete it? Or was she just fulfilling the almost mandated outcome of the trial that you have to grow something throughout all of this? And as Agatha said, out of death, life. Does this mean she has accepted the death of her son, Nicholas Scratch? Or does it mean she has accepted it's time to face death? While Agatha has completed the trial and the Witch's Road, the danger is not over. And in possibly one of my favourite scenes of the MCU, death is waiting for Agatha on top of her house, cackling the house down. She has created a tornado-like storm. The sky is this dark green, very menacing and devilishly evil. Death's cackle not only reminds me of the Wicked Witch of the West, but here in Ireland, there is a witch-like figure in our mythology called the Banshee. The name Banshee comes from Irish, the native language here in Ireland prior to our British colonisation, and it essentially means fairy woman, and she is essentially the herald of death. It is thought that if you hear her shrieking, wailing, screaming or crying, that someone close to you is going to die, often a family member. It is also said that she has long hair that she combs, and again, if you see this is another sign that someone close to you is near death. It is said she wears a grey cloak over a green dress and has a ghastly complexion. Who does that remind you of, especially in this moment? Rio. And she is cackling and screaming on Agatha's roof. So just like the Banshee, she is saying someone is close to death, and in this case it's either Agatha or Billy. I have wondered throughout the whole Agatha All Along show whether we'd guess something similar to the Banshee, and this is definitely the closest that we'd ever get to it. Now, accounts of the Banshee go as far back as the 1300s and Norman literature. However, I do recognise that Rio as Death resembles a lot of different figures and, you know, legends across different mythologies and folklores and cultures. After all, death is quite a general thing, so many cultures will have these types of figures that looks and appears very similar. Agatha tries to summon her powers, but nothing comes. I want my prize. And Rio says, so do I. And she scares us with her skull face as lightning strikes. Rio is not happy because while Agatha got Billy through the trial on the Witch's Road, he had to surrender himself, but he's nowhere to be found. So Death wants Agatha instead, and we get our MCU show finale fight. Poor Herb is standing in his garden, and him and the people of Westview are just, how they don't all have PTSD and they've all turned out like Ralph, I do not know. Agatha notices that the moon is in its fire phase, and this reminds her of Alice and her trial in episode 4. After all, Alice's trial took place during the fire phase moon as well, and her element is fire. This fire moon reminds Agatha of Alice's protection in that trial, and uses a sandbag to create a protection circle and cites the Latin incantation Expelleoc Malum, just like Alice. So even in death, Alice is still protecting her coven, and so much for the covenless witch, who is now learning from her coven sisters. However, Rio is offended because she's calling Rio, aka Death, evil, and Death says,
I am the natural order of all things, baby, and you love me.
And Rio is that psycho lover that lives within all of us. And then we hear that line that Lilia warned Agatha about.
You are a coward!
And Agatha thankfully remembers and hits the deck, while Rio literally throws the kitchen sink at Agatha, which would have definitely, if not killed her, definitely would have wounded her. And the psycho lover speaks out again.
Why don't don't you want me?
Now, she says this after she tried to kill her. However, if you think about it, dying is like the ultimate experience of Rio, or death. So maybe she's like, you used to love me, we were in a relationship, and you haven't experienced this part of me. Why wouldn't you want to? Rio uses vines to slit the back of Agatha's foot. However, she yet again proves that she learned from her coven sisters, and just like Jen, uses the moon water as a form of healing and says the Latin incantation. Agatha uses another method she learned from her coven, from Jen, with the healing moon water. However, Rio uses the vines to pull her by her arms and her neck to tie her against this post. Almost like a witch being tied to the stake before execution. So this could be a bigger FU to Agatha by Rio, by resembling this as a witch trial. And if they did meet on that fateful night when Agatha killed her coven, then this literally resembles how Agatha was tied to a post. So this is quite toxic and traumatic, if that's the case. As Rio, or Death, walks towards Agatha, suddenly the electricity in Agatha's house explodes, and Rio is then hurled across the garden. What's this? Wiccan, the son of the Scarlet Witch, has arrived, ladies and gentlemen. Wiccan, the son of the Scarlet Witch, has arrived and flies in with the WandaVision music and looks perfect, resembling the comics perfectly. I mean, this is Wiccan. Joe Locke was born to play Wiccan, and that costume fits him like a glove. Close-up images reveal much more detail: runes, Wanda's crown, Vision's Mind Stone, and this is like a nod to his soul parents, if you will.
Don't take it all.
And he gives Agatha what she was missing and what she wanted from the Rose, power. And this confirms that yes, Agatha can control her absorption abilities and can take just a little and leave the other person with the majority. So poor Alice was intentional. Seeing Wiccan and that blue magic in the MCU, give us those young Avengers, give me Hulkling, we are ready for it. And as Billy was giving his power to Agatha, I was literally counting every second, watching his skin like, bitch, you're not taking him as well. You got one of the BFFs, you're not taking the other. And we finally got to see Agatha stop the absorption before killing someone, and this is the first time we're seeing this in the MCU. Agatha gets her WandaVision era costume back, but Rio re-enters the scene, and we get to see more of that gorgeous costume. And I really hope that Agatha all along is put up for awards and that the costumes get an award, because they are just outstanding, all of them, for everyone. And Rio as Death gets a lot of costumes, but they're all amazing. Now, I really appreciate that Rio is wearing her crown, and Death just lays it out for them. One of you is coming with me. Agatha charges up her new purple, while Rio flings Billy away, almost to say like, right, let the adults play now. And we see some great moves by both Rio and Agatha with their magic, and this is the first time we're seeing Rio's green magic. Agatha and Rio get some time to play, basically, and then Billy comes to Agatha's defense, but Agatha says, you know we can't fight Death. And Agatha reassures Billy,
You're not bad. Neither are you. You're the only one who thinks so.
Death comes back and Billy offers himself up to Death, and Agatha says, you heard him, take the boy. But Rio seems unsatisfied with this option. For Rio, she wants her lover, and if her lover doesn't want her, then no one can have her. Despite offering himself up, Billy is confused, and he was clearly expecting Agatha to be like, no, take me. So he uses his telepathy to speak with Agatha, and again, this is probably the first time he's using it being in control.
Agatha, I know you can hear me. Is this how Nikki died?
Agatha then walks up to Rio and kisses her. So we're getting our kiss, but as they're kissing, Agatha starts absorbing Rio's powers. And we learned way back in episode 1 that if she did that, she would die.
So take my power.
It's cute, but you know that would kill me.
So Agatha is facing Death And while she's absorbing the powers, you can still call this the kiss of death because she's kissing death. As she absorbs death's power, we can see this black flowy energy go inside of her. Agatha then raises up and falls back, and we see the life drain out of her, like she has done to many other witches. Then, in a lovely tribute, Rio transforms Agatha's remains into a lovely little garden of flowers and mushrooms, and again is emphasizing the from death comes life. Like for all of us, when we decompose, we are like fertilizer essentially, and from our death, then the earth continues to make new life. The dark green storm goes away and the sun returns. Like I've said previously, you can really compare Rio to Mother Nature because she shares a lot of the same values, concept, characteristics. And if Rio can also control the weather, I mean, what more do you want? Now, you will notice the majority of flowers are purple, obviously as a tribute to Agatha. Now, Billy picks up Agatha's brooch, and just keep a note of that for the next episode. Death then turns around in her true form. And while we saw this in episode 7, we weren't this up close. So we're getting a proper look at this like skull face. We can see the mandible and the maxilla and the lack of a nose, but still with Aubrey Plaza's gorgeous eyes. It's still scary as hell, but also still gorgeous in some way. Only Aubrey Plaza could pull this off. Now, possibly with telepathy, Death communicates with Billy.
You may go.
And this also is a slightly different voice than what Rio speaks.
Heard you guys were having a party.
It actually sounds a lot kind of scarier.
You may go.
After all, this is Death speaking, not Rio the Green Witch. And let us not forget, Rio Vidal is her name. In Spanish, that means River of Life. As Billy leaves Agatha's garden, the people of Westview surround him and he pulls his hood up, just like his mother. Just like Wanda, Billy is feeling some sense of shame or guilt, likely because Agatha sacrificed herself for him, and the people of Westview are likely annoyed because for the last 3 years, Agatha has been, I'm not going to say a normal neighbour, but probably a nice neighbour. Billy then drives home, which I know a lot of people were like, okay, doesn't kind of feel the same, or, you know, as seeing Wanda fly off, but of course, he's not Wanda. We then see Billy get home and we see Rebecca and Jeff Kaplan again, very worried about him. And Jeff says,
I'm gone for 24 hours. What happened?
So the entire Witches Road journey only took 24 hours. Again, despite what we're about to find out, clearly the Witches Road, while it is on Earth, it still operates somewhat differently. And time passes very differently as well, because to them it likely felt like days. Billy comes back into his room after a shower and he starts to look around and see a lot of similarities between his room and the Witches Road. Some of the Easter eggs that we didn't catch in Billy's room previously include a poster for the Rocky Horror Picture Show, a Buffy the Vampire Slayer poster, which is extra cool because the actress who plays Dottie, aka Sarah Proctor, was actually in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. We see an image that looks to be the devil and a woman, and of course, the devil was often thought to be like the ringleader and master of witches back during witch trials. We see a lot of crystals known for their energies, healing and protection, something that Jennifer, as a potions witch and root worker, would likely know a lot about. We also see an image of the Hindu goddess Durga, who is a warrior goddess, often depicted riding a lion or a tiger. A poster for Poltergeist 2. We see that Trans Lives Matter flag, very important. We see an hourglass, which of course was the timer in episode 7 in Lilia's trial. We see those figurines, which I completely misidentified, but thankfully you informed me they're Wizard of Oz figurines. The Wicked Witch, who Billy obviously thinks of Agatha for. A poster for Haxan, which is a 1922 silent film about witchcraft. We then see flashbacks of when Billy was asking Agatha to take him to the road and Agatha was saying the road doesn't exist. This is something that ties into episode 9, but of course we will discuss that in the episode 9 breakdown. We see a tarot card poster of the moon representing illusion and deception. and therefore often suggests a time when something is not as it appears to be, perhaps a misunderstanding on your part or a truth you cannot admit to yourself. This is an early warning to us as the audience before Billy makes the conclusion that he created the Witch's Road. As we can see, a lot of the things he surrounds himself with were part of the road. As the audience, we misunderstood the road, and Billy could not admit the truth to himself, and thus it was an illusion, a deception represented through the Moon Tarot card. Just after seeing that, we then hear Lilia reading the Magician card that she pulled for Billy, emphasizing on Billy's enormous potential and the ability to make all of his goals reality. In one flashback, Agatha says, "I didn't think you had it in you." And I'm now interpreting that as one of two things, or possibly both. Number one, she didn't think he had it in him to create all of this. But number two, which I really think is what it is, she didn't think he had it in him to actually kill the witches if they did not survive the trial. We then see the same leaves that were on the road. We see a painting of the same beach where the house of episode 3 was, and we see a Ouija board like in episode 5. We see another double entendre as Agatha said to him,
None of this would be nearly as dramatic.
referring to the Witch's Road itself, and how, like his mama, their creations are very dramatic. All the pieces are falling into place, and Billy is realizing he created the Witch's Road using his mind and his powers. He made the underground Witch's Road that had a moon, a geographical location, that had rules to magic, that manifested all of these things. As Billy comes to this realization, we hear Agatha's evil laugh. This is spine-chilling for Billy. As he turns around, we just hear... And that concludes episode 8 of Agatha All Along. So despite not being the last episode, it's still the finale of the season, and it does and doesn't have certain traits of MCU Disney Plus show finales. We do have an action sequence, but it's minimal CGI and not just for the sake of a fight. It makes sense, and it helps convey to us the relationship and dynamic between Agatha and Rio, aka Death. It also helps progress Agatha and Billy's relationship, which then results in Agatha sacrificing herself for Billy in honor of her own son. I have seen some people upset that Agatha died and Billy lived. However, we need to remember that it was kind of a miracle that we got this show in the first place, and he was always going to be a co-lead and a significant part of this story. Let's remember, Agatha is part 2 of a WandaVision trilogy. So while they can tell other stories, they still wanted to pertain to the story that was started in WandaVision. Now, my bet is if Billy wasn't in Agatha All Along, we may have not gotten Agatha All Along, because clearly Billy, or Wiccan, was always going to make his way to the MCU once WandaVision had started that story. But we were lucky that it was done so within Agatha's show. I too want to see more of Agatha's life. I too want to see more of Rio and Agatha and their relationship. But we also need to remember the bigger picture and be realistic about these shows that they produce for entertainment, to tell stories, and in a larger sense, as a profit and as a business. I also do not endorse misdirecting our own frustrations towards one character just because we don't get everything we want from another character. Now, I will touch more on this in our episode 9 breakdown, because we'll have more freedom to actually talk about the show as an entirety, including what happens in episode 9, but I did want to just touch on it lightly. Now, I have to say, I really enjoyed this episode, and while I found the last trial maybe unsatisfying, I'm not sure why, to be honest. I find it unsatisfying. It just feels like it was very short, or something was missing, despite it involved Jen getting her powers back, her lovely pink powers, and Billy reincarnating Tommy, which is huge. I will say the final kind of sequence between Agatha, Rio, aka Death, and Billy as Wiccan is definitely going to be one of my favourite scenes out of the MCU. I personally really enjoyed it. I'm so intrigued with Rio or Death, and I really hope we get to see more of her. And I also love that Wiccan is finally here. So I really want to hear from you guys. What are your thoughts on episode 8? What did you think of the final trial, of Jen getting her powers back? I mean, it was Agatha all along with Jen. However, this was Billy all along with the Witch's Road. However, unlike his mother, it's not something that necessarily has to be taken down, but we will obviously see more in episode 9. Let me know your thoughts. I really love being able to hear what you guys think, your theories, your own breakdowns and Easter eggs that you spot that I don't. So please let me know in the comments below. You can also do so by finding my socials in the description, which includes my TikTok where you can find Agatha related content. And be sure to give the video a like and click that subscribe button for more so you don't miss episode 9 breakdown. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I'm Nico at Pop Incursions. See you next time.